Yeah, I got involved in helping to run the last assessment of what we know about climate change for governments. It ran from 2002 to 2007. And towards the end of 2007, we were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for this. And I think it was part of a recognition that all the scientists coming together and trying to really be objective about what they know and what they don't know is becoming widely recognized as increasingly important. I think the risks due to sea level rise have not been considered properly, and so it really needs more detailed planning, and it needs to start considering whether or not the costs will just escalate for low-lying land holding State Highway 1. That's the issue. But when talking about changes on the coastline of this magnitude, one has to also keep in mind that the whole, because it's all based on sand, even though it's hard packed sand, and the water table is going to lift, does this mean the whole thing will become less stable? And so even if you have a highway sitting on pylons, they will all start to move as well. The issue is really that we're moving into a new planet, frankly, and we have to be very careful now about thinking about how to do the best options here and there. And whether or not this is going to cost a lot more money in the long term is one thing. Whether it's actually sustainable in the long term is another. Well, one of the problems that those of us on the science side have is that the rates at which the planet's changing is just going up the whole time. It's really quite bizarre. So just in this year we found that the water coming in under the big ice sheets around Greenland is much warmer than any scientists expected. And then we've seen huge sheet of ice break off, and then right on the very north side of Greenland, right up near the North Pole. It's amazing. This was not expected. Scientists are struggling to understand the rate at which things are happening. And the funny thing about this is that as the Greenland ice collapses, it raises sea level in New Zealand more than it does in England. And that's because it shifts the whole gravitational field on the planet a little bit. And so more of the water in the oceans slump down into the south than the way that get attracted around into the north around Greenland. So these are really global issues, and it's very important for New Zealand to understand that as all that ice loses out of Greenland, it means that our coastal management has to start shifting. So as the planet starts to change more and more rapidly, it means that we have to think very carefully about how we use the environment. And the big issues I think that have emerged in science in the last 10 years are sea level rise and coastal management. So when we're thinking about a huge major investment that's structural around the northern part of the Wellington region, going up through the Cavity Coast area, it really means we have to think differently. We have to be much more risk averse and much more careful. Well, I can understand why people want to be a bit conservative about not thinking that the world is going to change on them. But New Zealand is just a little fortunate that some of these changes are happening more slowly because we're just surrounded by the ocean. If you look at what's happening in many other parts of the world, it's becoming increasingly obvious that we're now having to live in a different environment. And the issue then becomes, well, is New Zealand not going to see any of that? And this is a strange thing about sea level rise, because as I said, if we lose all those big ice sheets up in Greenland, actually the effect will be bigger in New Zealand than it would in England. So I think that we need to have people starting to understand that the future is different to the past. And the science doesn't know all the answers, but we can point generally in the way in which we have to start dealing with things. And there are risks. Yeah, you might want to believe it, and a lot of people don't, but I would say now that one of the reasons they're going to start having to shift that position is we're seeing major companies around the world shift, and the reinsurance industry, which is the stopgap for all our insurance policies in the world, they have started to take a much stronger line now on adapting to climate change. And this year, for example, over 100 of the major companies signed up an agreement with the United Nations Environment Programme. They're recognising that we're not doing enough about risk management. We're seeing some of the huge banking organisations and investment organisations dealing with literally trillions of dollars now recognise that they're going to have to start shifting that money into new technology to reduce climate change. But even so, you know, we're still going to have to deal with a lot more climate change this century than we've seen in the past. So it's something that when you're planning for what you do on your coastline, you've got to be more risk averse than we have in the past. Just to set back from the beach around Waikanae, that have obviously not been developed because they are low-lying and they have swamps and they have water lakes and things like that sitting there, and the ducks love them. But the question becomes now, well, how will they be affected by sea level rise? They're not very high above sea level. And what's more, you've got to think about how the connection between the water coming down and the water coming up from different perspectives, and is going to meet in some of those places. So I think there's quite a lot of land that's only about 2 meters above sea level, and shifting a road down to that area needs to be thought about pretty carefully.